Welcome to Trending in Education. We made it to the second half of the year. Good job by us. 2020 July. I hear tell there's a trend happening right now that it's in fact July, and I have two of our regular contributors here on Trending in Education, Melissa Griffith and Dan Strafford, here to weigh in on how we've made it to the second half of the year, which is great. And then now that we're heading towards the second half of the year, what do we see on the horizon? What's capturing our attention? So maybe kick it off with you, Melissa. How are you doing? What's on your mind? You've been on plenty of our shows lately. You've been dialing it in, dialing it up, dialing it. You know,
there's just so much to talk about these days. I only have one question for you. Is it July 2021 or 2020? Because it feels like more than 6 months have gone by.
Yeah.
In this time right now.
It's 2020. It's the year is so nice. They named it twice, and we're in the second. We're in the second half of it. So, file away first half 2020.
This
Open
is
up
super awkward.
A fresh pack of second half of 2020.
This is super awkward. I took a lot of sleep aid, and I hoped I would sleep through the rest of the year, but you're telling me I haven't. So on that note, Dad, I haven't seen you in forever. How are you doing?
I heard someone on social media refer to the Tiger King portion of lockdown, like as a specific section of time where everyone was obsessed with Tiger King. Yes. That feels like a year ago.
That
feels
like
legitimately a long time ago, and it's
like middle of March?
Yeah, maybe? Like 8 weeks ago. I'm doing all right. I saw a squirrel in, I believe, Colorado or Minnesota tested positive for bubonic plague today, which is a good way to kick off the second half of the year.
And just to be clear, Dan, you saw an article about that. You did not see the squirrel.
I did not perform the test.
You did not see with your own eyes in person administer the bubons test. It's called the bubons.
Right.
So you're saying the bubons is coming back.
I read some stuff. I read some stuff.
Good. So you've been reading the internet is what you're saying.
Yes, and we know
which part of the internet, Dan?
Well, then we know your contributions will be outstanding.
Yes, sir.
So there's a couple things, we generally have not been a particularly partisan show. We try not to be too political, but there's just so much stuff going on around the president these days that we did think this episode would be good to touch on a little bit of that. One topic that we wanted to hit on, one of our trends that actually didn't do so well in our March Madness tournament was tabloid education or tabloid ed. And, there has been a good deal of salacious tabloid-like news about the president. And then, at least in this most recent book that was published, there was talk of whether he actually took the SATs or whether he had somebody paid somebody to take them for him. I thought that was an interesting time when something that's capturing at least my attention as someone who tries to understand educational trends and also just sort of the narrative of the tabloid stories. When we talked about tabloid ed in the past, we were talking about Operation Varsity Blues. Right. And now it's like Operation Varsity Blues has hopped over to the Oval Office, or at least to the earlier days of the Oval Office. I would put it out there that I don't know which is worse, paying to get your daughters on the crew team at USC or paying someone to take your SATs for you. I guess the latter. I don't know. No, the former is worse, right? I don't know. Anyway, thoughts.
Wait, I have a question before and then I'll give my thoughts.
Yeah.
Does anyone believe that he didn't do it? Does anyone believe he really sat his own SATs?
I want to see his long form SAT results, and then I'll evaluate it. All right. So I actually want to see the raw Scantrons. Assuming that he actually did they use Scantrons? Probably, right? I don't know. He's old.
I don't think they used Scantrons. I think it was probably a lot easier to game the test back then, though, and to let someone else take it. I will say this. I don't know why you would have someone else take your SATs when you're a stable genius. But that being said, it does not surprise me, and it fits a pattern that we actually know about him, that he takes shortcuts. And we are seeing that a lot. And so it doesn't surprise me that it's not that if you ask him, and if he ever admitted that it was true or it came out that it was true that he had someone paid to take his SATs, I think what he would say is, I could have done it. I didn't have the time, so I let someone else do it. But of course, I'm smart enough to take it myself.
Right.
Which this fits his pattern, so I'm not surprised. And it doesn't surprise me that he did it.
I just want to make sure he's not paying anyone to take his cognitive awareness test as the president, because that'd be suspect. But Dan, please.
Well, to your question of which is worse, I think it's a tough decision to make. I do feel as though it is worse for a parent to do it for a child and take that ownership out of their hands rather than he himself potentially, according to this Mary Trump book, paying someone directly to take the SATs for him. There is a certain entrepreneurship.
That's what I was going to say. Yes. I was ready to devil's advocate right after you said that, because, I guess he hired well, got a good score.
Which is fine. And I think
is what he's good for.
You mentioned tabloid media and tabloid education.
Yeah.
This fits right into the salacious Varsity Blues and Lori Laughlin and all of these people that we've talked about.
And on that front, Lori Laughlin, Dan, we talked offline about this, the fact that when is there a better time to take your 2-week sentence than in the middle of the COVID lockdown? Right. Although you want to make sure there's good social distancing in the minimum security facility that you serve from. So yeah, actually I have to double check. I don't know what my takes are on any of these things anymore. Like it's tough calls,
I will say to take it as it always is, right? If you live a life of privilege, you have easier roads, which is what all of this is showing us.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, I was thinking about that at least that aspect of the narrative is in stark contrast to a lot of the conversations about equity and access, where access is really, just a check away. You just write a check and you get access. And that's the same theme that was there in Operation Varsity Blues. To me, it ties very much to the idea of affluenza too, where like there is a little bit of, sad trombone for these folks, who have shallow but privileged lives. At least that's sort of a perception that is out there, that they're, kind of like a loveless home, not really a sense of connection beyond something that's more like transactional and tribal. But anyway, we're trying not to be overly political on this show, but I thought that was an interesting one to look at.
Absolutely.
And then similarly, I did want to make sure we talked a little bit about Betsy DeVos, who's had a tough run of it. Also, on the tabloid ed side, so Betsy DeVos, truth be told, I'm not a huge fan. I have been known to call her Cruella DeVos, although I see other people do that too. So I felt less original about it and I kind of stopped doing it. But she was in the news for a number of reasons. We could talk about any or all of them. But the one that I found most interesting was that she was getting shamed for her bookcase that didn't contain any books. Right. And I'm going out there on a limb there, but I'm going to come out against bookcase shaming. I am a strong negative on any bookcase shaming. We're all dealing with the COVIDs, right? Maybe the bubons, like things are kind of upside down, topsy-turvsies. Like I said, I don't know. Occasionally, maybe it's a miscue, and she had no books, right? Is that she had no books in the bookcase?
Here's the thing.
Yeah.
Here's the thing for me. One, if you're making a conscious decision to decorate your bookcases, to not have books there, to make it more artistic in a way, good on you. Like if that's a decision you're making, and that's what it seemed like your office choice was.
It's like the living room with the plastic on the couch cushions. Like it's a little too.
I'm gonna go to the other side, and then Dan, I'll let you go back to it. Like one, I'm with no shaming, right? So it's her choice, and it's just a shelf, right? We have for all we know, there's another part of her office that
maybe she's a huge Kindle reader. We don't know.
Maybe she made the decision to go more green, and so she doesn't have books.
Maybe she's an audible.
Maybe she's not audible like myself. So I think there are so many ways. So I refuse to get into the shaming game with her on that one. But
right.
I have so many. Let's go to the next Betsy DeVos topic, and then I'll have so much to say about her.
I do want to point out, though, like the one thing that's amazing about this is we're dealing with cancel culture, right? We're dealing with whatever's happening on social media around different people, and you get caught doing something 20 years ago, and the Twitter mob comes for you. There's a account that does Zoom backgrounds, that rates the backgrounds. Now, from a content perspective, like this is what I think is amazing that's happening on social media right now is that someone is out there having fun rating people's backgrounds and saying, and actually forcing the hands of anchors and analysts to change their backgrounds on the fly because they don't want to be named on Twitter.
What
their background
which is awesome that she had a very clean background. It was less distracting. Like I also, because I find it sometimes annoying when people have a whole bunch of books and there's always one book highlighted. I actually find that annoying too. I'm like, I know you haven't read that. That book just came out. But it's just not practical.
But it is the year of the backdrop, so it's not surprising that backdrop shaming has begun. And then Betsy DeVos does she's a pretty easy target these days because she hasn't done much positive that I've seen as Secretary of Education. And then this would be a great time for Secretary of Education to really have a plan for how to turn around the lives of these kids and families that have been really turned upside down by the pandemic, the response to the pandemic, just the emotional state of the learners out there. If you had a caring educator, someone who was actually thinking about how to lead kind of fireside chat, talk about the power of education right now, I would love to see that from Betsy DeVos. I just don't think she has it in her.
I would too, and I would love for her to not be hypocritical in even her stance, right? So like her latest stance to try and set nationwide guidelines for reopening schools is against off-brand. Like I a Republican, Democrat, Independent, Liberal. We're all allowed to have our opinions on how best to run government. It is the thing that has annoyed me about Betsy's latest stance is contrary to what she has always believed in, right? Which is you push the power down to the parents and the local schools. Now that Trump has gotten on his platform to reopen the schools to reopen the economy, all of a sudden they want to push a national agenda, and it's just counter, right? And it's not even practical at this point, which I think is the much more concerning point, which is why I like the background and all these things, and outrage culture, which is a way to distract from what they're doing, which is what I think is really sad.
Right. I mean, that's the tabloid aspect of it, is that like as humans, I think we gravitate towards the salacious, the sensational, and it's just there's something kind of grab hold of there. So I think that is a natural tendency, but yeah, especially when you think about the level of sophisticated testing regimens that really should be there if you want to be, intellectually consistent about your policy. If you're going to say makes sense to send the kids back, then that should go hand in hand with how to make sure the kids and teachers and staff and everyone is safe. And it's an interesting time to be doing this show. That's why I'm happy that we got back together. It's at least once a month, hopefully maybe twice a month, we can get at least three of us to do a sanity check. Are you seeing what I'm seeing? It's like those kinds of things.
Well, that's Mike, in that regard, for going back to school, for my opinion, I don't think there's a single person who doesn't want students back in the classroom. I think that's something everyone can agree on. It's just the steps to get there in a healthy and safe manner. That, to Melissa's point, in the past, this Secretary of Education would have said is up to governors, mayors, districts, parents, and all those things. And now it does seem there's a weird switch without an actual plan, without an actual, here's how we're going to do it across these multiple places. I have a problem with people saying, oh, you don't want kids to go back to school. No, one, as a parent, I need my kids to go back. Secondarily, of course, there is a social aspect to public and even private school for elementary and middle school. We know that. We've seen that. And so I don't want my kids on Zoom all the time. I don't want that, but I need to see the how. How are we going to do this and mitigate as much as we can the spread of this pandemic that is clearly not yet going away? And that's where I get frustrated with the all or nothing, again, of social media, of outrage culture, of, well, you just don't want kids in school, clearly. You want this to fail. No, I just want my kids to be safe, all kids to be safe that are going to school and have a plan in place.
One thing just real quick, remember growing up in school, there's always, can we have class outside?
Right.
I do think it's going to be the year of class outside, right? Like that, from everything I'm hearing, being outside is one of the healthiest places to be. Obviously, you got to, wear a mask and social distance, particularly in close proximity to others. But I do expect there'll be a lot of class outside. And then the other thing real quick is, rather than homeschooling, I've taken to calling it schooling from home, kind of like working from home. So I think everybody is going to be mixing a lot more class outside and a lot more schooling from home. And then around all of that, maybe some judicious use of a traditional physical classroom footprint. But even just the redesign of these physical spaces is going to be fascinating.
I mean, not to keep harping on a broken record, but schooling outside or homeschooling, like urban, which we know it's code for other topics, right? Those are the people that are going to suffer, right? And so we've got to have government. I think when we talked about the COVID crisis initially, when it came out and we were talking about this, we mentioned it and we haven't seen any action. We've got to have real practical solutions for schools, especially where disadvantaged youths are and so forth, in order to keep education going. Because the gap, like when it was just expected to be 3 or 6 months, the gap might have been like achievable to get back from. This one, we're entering no man's land where these students are going to fall behind and further behind with what hope of catching up, right? So I think we need to get kids back into school. How we get them back into school safely is the challenge, and no one's working on it because everyone's playing politics at this point.
Well, and I also think, to your point, there may be just lost years in terms of our collective educational timelines. To me, what kids need now more is feeling safe with adults they trust, who are looking out for them. And then ideally, some of those adults are not their parents. And then ideally, they start getting some, even just for their own sense of self and independent identity. Like maybe this is me just as an individualistic American talking here, but like I actually think that's an important part of your psychosocial development, is like you got to be able to operate outside of the home, outside of your parents. And like we'd already been trending towards a very cautious mindset for like the rising generations. And, I'm looking forward to the other side, but it's probably maybe 2 years from now when you can almost try to inspire a little bit of courage back into folks who are going to be shook, understandably. Like the level of anxiety that we're all living with these days is really unprecedented.
Yeah. Agreed. It's been amazing to watch this process unfold, and people expect it to just go away. And that's not a political statement. Just, I think as a culture, people expected this to sort of ride out, and we'd hit 3 or 4 months and then we'd start going back to what we were doing and slowly ease back into life. And now we're hitting this continuing first wave or second wave, whatever terminology. And I think there is a toll on the psyche and on the emotional well-being of adults, but also on these students who are now in summer. And again, that I think for a large part, that at least is a cognitive moment of, I'm not supposed to be in school right now. Like I can disconnect and I can have those moments of, but once September rolls around and we get back into, if this is the same mode, I think that's a whole different ball game from support, social emotional learning, from all of those sorts of things.
Yeah.
And it's depressing, right? Like, because in the summer you used to hang out with your friends, all right? And it's being away from the people who allow you back to that point to build your identity and to build your independence. That's the part that we're not even beginning to talk about. And you already see some of the articles of kids being depressed, right? Because they're not able to go out, angry, and they're getting frustrated, and it's only going to get worse. Right?
And it builds on the same trends. The Fortnite generation, they're hanging out with their friends playing video games, but there are ways in which people are going to work around some of these things. So the resourcefulness and the creativity that we have to meet our emotional needs is something that I am struck by here in Brooklyn. The outside dining, outside park life experience. Our lifestyles have adjusted and folks are trying to find outlets, also because the numbers are relatively good, at least right now, after they were much, much worse before. But what I'm just struck by is just the level to which we are an adaptable species and we find ways to kind of power through this. But I think your point, Melissa, is the one that I keep coming back to, is like, what about those boundary cases, the folks who don't even know how to get access to services? And then, if that same group doesn't have that comfort level to A, seek out the help, and then B, seek it out digitally, how do you get, and I've seen more of this in New York, to like try to get out into the community with the services, but there's going to be eventually, I think it's going to be tough to fund that type of outreach unless it comes from the movement, from the police funding. It's just crazy, the amount of stuff that's going on right now.
It is. I mean, it's crazy. And I talk to friends in other countries around the world. And it's not the same, right? Like there is something fundamentally wrong with what's happening in America versus the rest of the world, and how we have chosen to deal with this, with this pandemic. And it's prolonging it, and it's going to make it hard for us to, in the long run, to recover from it, right?
Yeah.
Like I, as much as everyone, I am a capitalist at my core, right? And I want the economy to open back up. But the reality is the every time we take steps to reopen, right? Like we face a backlash because we have not shut down properly, right? And it's frustrating, right? And the ricochet effects are all over. It's in education. It's in the job. It's in like the frustration people are feeling. The hospitals, like the articles you read about the mental toll it's taken on doctors and nurses to be in this situation. Like this is the one time where I miss be in a country that is much more family first than individual first, because I fundamentally believe that's the reality of what we're like. Everything good about capitalism and about this economy and about independence in America is what I think has really led us to where we are right now and how we're dealing with this. That and our government, but whatever.
But on the other topic, while we're in the neighborhood of policies that have an impact, and it is a place where both Donald Trump and Betsy DeVos have been pretty forceful in their position around F1 student visas, and once the delivery goes fully online, that students, international students who are here on those student visas would no longer qualify to be in the United States. So yeah, thank you for reminding me of that one, Dan, because that one really has me incensed on a number of fronts, more so than a bookcase. That is actually a thumb in the eye to a lot of what I believe in around both, having the diversity that we want on our college campuses, innovation that you get from folks who come to America, get their education here, and then found companies here and contribute back in orders of magnitude beyond what we might have hoped for to begin with. That's the first thing. And then secondly, to just offhand say that online learning is garbage when see what we were talking about before as to whether President Trump has taken his learning experience too hard throughout his life. There is some evidence that he has, like it does sound like the military school was formative to him, and he likes to talk about his Wharton, UPenn pedigree. But I'm somewhat suspicious about that he was actually an engaged learner to begin with, and that he has an accurate assessment of whether online learning is adequate or not. So like, I think there are that's my two takes on that is one, the stifling of innovation by stifling immigration and the free movement of folks. Folks should want to study in U.S. universities. That's how we maintain a lot of our competitive edge in the world, and to not have awareness of that and tie it to your anti-immigration platform is really frustrating to begin with. And then secondly, really seems like an uninformed take on the potential of quality online learning. What do y'all think?
I can hop first. I think what you laid out about the economic ramifications here is one that I don't know that everyone reading about this story fully understands. Like these are typically, again, not always, some of the best students at these schools are coming from international countries outside the United States. So we are then saying to them, you need to leave because you're going to be studying online, and the ramifications of them no longer being enrolled, the tuition there, or whatever you want to say that, but also them staying in the States, building a family here, building a business here, keeping the innovation, keeping it here is mitigated. It's sent back overseas, which is concerning. I think there's the obvious sign of this administration in the past has had some severe problems with immigration, some severe problems with the way people come into this country and how they go about it. This seems to be another salvo in that discussion of trying to keep people who are not following the exact letter of a rule from being able to stay for whatever reason. And then I think you made a good point that I really didn't even think of almost the passive aggressive wave away of online learning, of sort of, well, this isn't real learning anyway. If you're not learning in a college campus, it doesn't count.
Right.
You have to leave. I hadn't thought of in that way either. But I think this is a much bigger story. I think there are 18 states who are suing the administration.
Since recording this, the federal government has changed their approach and are no longer planning to rescind the F1 visas to international students studying in the U.S. who only have access to online learning. We left this in because the conversation got pretty good, and we think these topics are relevant, and hopefully our listeners enjoy it.
Yeah, well, I think everyone is going to come to terms with the fact that online education is part of the future pretty much across the board. I can't see that really fully rolling back. I think the question is how do you provide access to that for everyone? And then also, how do you provide the other services that were provided through schools when we're sort of entering into this hybrid flex model, which it's got to be a hybrid, right? I was thinking about the architecture of schools recently, something I'd love to maybe do a show about in the future. What are the emerging trends from architects who are thinking about the design of learning environments? There's been a lot of work around libraries as well. How do we redesign them to be more learner-centered? And then can you do that in a way that's also, embracing social distance, and then is also ideally proximal to students who need it, regardless of where they are? So that gets back to the previous point about access.
What is really frustrating to me about this ICE and international students, aside from the fact that I'm an immigrant and I came here to do my college education, is that it's all smoke and mirrors to me, because the government, they're saying, they're all doing it for the reopening of the economy, and we're doing it because students need to learn. Foreign students actually pay full tuition. I like to think that Harvard and the MITs and of the world are altruistic and they care about their students. Those are the students that fund the university, right? Almost all of us pay full tuition to come here. We don't get scholarships. At best, we will get work study grants because we're not allowed to work in this country. And so it's what is needed in order for us to have these universities survive in the economy, and then to all the other points that you've made on it. The other thing it is that it feels very fundamentally to me like this country this administration does everything to actually negate foreigners coming into this country, and the backbone of this country was built on immigrants. And so for me, it's frustrating and it's short-sighted. Because innovation will move. We're seeing it move already. And that's why the tech companies and everyone is also jumping on the bandwagon. The good news is because I read this just before we came online, the administration is feeling the pressure and they've already started to take steps backwards. Like you've heard them talk about the fact that they're rethinking it a little bit. Right? That just broke. Because I don't think they can withstand the pressure of all the companies who got on the side of the university saying this was a bad idea. So especially I don't expect it to go forward.
Especially research, technology, innovation, engineering, which does speak to a separate topic, which is what is the U.S. doing to develop its own engineering talent, which is, again, it's where, like, for me, I do try to not go too negative, instead try to say, if our Department of Education was trying to inspire the competitive spirit that Americans have to develop better engineering, and if it actually felt like there was a thoughtful program, even funding, expend to develop your own engineering talent in the US, but instead it's more like they're taking our spots rather than they're the best. In many cases, they're better educated and they're better able to perform in these highly competitive environments. But I think it becomes that whole scarcity conversation where it's either my underqualified seat or someone else bumping me out of what I'm entitled to, which, full circle comes back to Varsity Blues and the idea that I can kind of like buy my way in or have some sense of entitlement or privilege. That means that's my seat. And even at the expense of innovation, I'm going to take what is owed to me at the expense of, really the competitive ability of our country.
The scarcity argument is a farce. I don't even engage in it, right? There's not a infinite amount of spots in the world. We've seen that as people get more educated, as people strive, more jobs are created, innovation breeds more sectors. We actually covered that on the Mika report a year ago. It is frustrating that it is so easy to gaslight this entire nation, that this is where we are. And the last thing I will say, as someone who came to America to study in this education system, and I still think it is one of the best at the college level. Yeah. University level, it is one of the best, if not the best in the world. And that's why people want to come here, and this country benefits from it. And yes, I think there is work to be done in the K through 12 space. Right. But it's not insurmountable by any means if we just focus on it.
Yeah, and if folks are concerned, Melissa, you are a naturalized U.S. citizen. You are not here on a visa, and you are expressing your opinion. You're
as American,
your mind as an American citizen, and good job by you. We all should be doing that. Yes.
Which, by the way, they may start revoking naturalized citizens. In which case, I may be one of the first. And I mean, if that's what happens,
that'll be good for our programming. So we'll have to cover that in some more depth. So yeah, we're coming up on time. Dan, any parting thoughts from you?
A show recommendation that I just started watching and I just find enjoyable, sort of a break. Upload on Amazon Prime is a fun show. I watched the first 2 episodes. What, you did that one already?
Done and done. Yeah.
Did you like it? I've enjoyed it. I think it's a little bit, tongue in cheek about technology, about the future. It has some dystopian aspects to it, but it also jokes around with AR and our brains connecting to a quote unquote heaven.
Well, maybe I'll catch up to y'all, and that might be an interesting one to break down. We like to break down, an occasional media engagement or two, so that might be a good one to pick up on. And Melissa, any thoughts from you heading into the second half of the year as we're wrapping up here?
One, Upload. I'm a little terrified this is why the economy needs to reopen, because all these seasons need to start back up. The only way surviving, the only reason I'm surviving this lockdown is because I watch a lot of television. And so I've started asking people to tell me if they're cliffhangers, because I can't. And
there's no closure at the end of the season.
There's no closure because there's definitely not a season.
Yeah, because Billions was like that for me, 100%. We binged on Billions, got caught up, and then mid-season it just stopped because they stopped shooting. Yeah. But Upload, good recommendation.
I'm looking forward to where online education is going to go. I think that is the wave. I am concerned as I'm not a parent, but for the kids and my friends who are parents, I'm worried for their mental health. I'm really worried
Thank you for that.
Yes, you're welcome. And you guys are both welcome. Because I'm not sure if you get through homeschooling. There is a reason, teaching is a job. Only certain people are capable of doing it.
Right.
If I started to have to do dentistry at home, it wouldn't work. It just I'd be over. No.
Yeah. I think online education's got to evolve in case we don't get out of this, and we've got to figure out a way to make it accessible to all.
Yeah. Great stuff. And also, what does it mean to be a teacher? How do we get more teachers' perspective, teachers' voices on the show? I think it'd be an interesting topic as well. All right. So there you go. We made it to the second half of the year. Here's to making it through the second half of the year. That's the second thing for us to think about. And, we'll be here on the regular, providing you the insight and perspective you need. Listen to us, subscribe, give us a rating, follow us on Twitter, do all the good things. And we'll be back again soon on Trending in Education.